Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the monthly public steering committee meeting. Today is May 4th, Monday, and my name is Nikita, and I will be your host for today. So first things first, we do have a code of conduct, so please be excellent to each other. This meeting is also being publicly recorded to YouTube, so please be mindful of that. Whatever you're going to say is going to be recorded forever. Lucky, you said you volunteered to take notes. Okay, and you've also added your name. Thank you so much. And before okay, let me share my screen so folks can see the agenda. Cool. This here. Okay. So before we move on to the items in the agenda, I just want to say that these are crazy times. So if you ever want to hear, say something to someone, or just want an ear, want someone to listen to you, we are always here for you, no judgments whatsoever. We might not always have the solutions to all your problems, but we will try to listen in and make sure that we'll point you to someone who knows the answer. So moving on to the agenda, first thing is welcome, Lucky. This is your first public steering committee meeting, so welcome. And very nice to have you on board. And moving.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
And okay, moving on to the next one, community health check updates from the breakout discussion. So a bunch of us steering folks met last week to talk a little bit more about the community health check issue that we are working on. If you don't have an idea about what that is, check out this PR by Paris, which goes into detail about everything. I just wanted to give a quick update about what things we discussed in the private breakout discussion in this public meeting. So, so first thing we talked about is that we want to make sure that it's not just another meeting or another survey or form that they need to fill out. So we want to make sure that the idea is that we lead with what the chairs and the SIGs get out of this. And the next thing is that we want to help them scale. That's the goal. So if they want private coaching or advice on any roles, we are also happy to help them provide that. And the other suggestion was to rename this to something like an annual report for your community group to make it sound a little more serious, a little more formal, so that folks actually get it done. If you have suggestions on naming or anything else, please feel free to put it on the PR. Cool. Paris, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about the PR?
I did actually had a question for folks. It was based off of a comment that you left, and I wanted to kind of call that out specifically. During the discussion, we talked about the private items, specifically the chair, how are you enjoying your role, things like that. It seemed like we had a divide amongst the group about whether or not chairs should individually and privately share that information with us, or if it should go on all one report. And I think it was kind of divided. I put it in and PR'd it in as all one report, just to get us kind of moving, because the PR used to be chairs will separately give us the information about them and their role, and then chairs collectively will turn in one report based off of their community group. But it sounded like folks just wanted one report for one group, including the feels of how they are doing in their role. So I guess my question to the group is, where does everybody stand on that now? The PR has the language in it about one report. So I didn't, and of course, if you didn't review the PR, that's no qualms. We can talk about it offline, but I think that's one of the only open questions / Not really sure about at this point.
Yeah, I spent maybe like 10 or 15 minutes this morning looking at the updated language that you pushed in yesterday, and I like where it is now. I definitely want to go like fine-tooth comb and make sure there's nothing that I'm missing as far as language and that kind of stuff. But at a high level, I think it's in a really good place as is right now, and we're pretty good with merging. As far as the specific question around private items and that kind of stuff, I think, you know, I'm trying to remember from our discussion last week, but I think where we were looking with that was something that we're going to talk about next is having like a liaison and that kind of stuff. And if there's anything that's like specific or private in addition to, or that a chair feels uncomfortable sharing with their fellow chairs on that report privately before it kind of goes through, that they have a contact to share that information with directly, like in that particular use case. But yeah, like the language as you've got right now with the one report, I like, and like I'm in favor of moving ahead with that as a solution for right now.
Hey Paris, this is Derek. I know I wasn't in the meeting last week where this was discussed, but reading the language you have there, it seems perfectly fine. And so I just wanted to weigh my +1 on support for the language there, given that I wasn't in the meeting. And my initial read on it, which is not biased by any other attendance, is thinking it's perfectly reasonable to put in that doc.
Thanks.
+1 from me, for the record.
I will, I'm going to address all of Nikita's comments in here. I'd say I took a quick glance at all of them this morning, and I'd like 9 out of 10 of them, I had like 0 qualms. So I will go ahead and submit. I think that one was the only one that I wanted to discuss, the one that you're showing right now on your screen, Nikita. So I'll go ahead and push out an update based on the comments and then get everybody to check that out. The next step that I left on the issue, the open-ended questions that are on the issue that are attached in the body, have to do with 2020 and how we move forward with 2020 reports, and or if we do 2021, etc. So.
So just if it's okay, ask a quick question.
Yeah.
When the report is submitted, is it this group that we're saying is going to read and act on the report, or are we assuming that particular areas of the report will get acted on by some other SIG or group?
We would be the one that would be collecting the reports to steering private initially, reading the reports, and a steering member will have either had already been assigned to that community group or whatnot. It's very similar to what you did with charters. That's kind of how I was envisioning it, where you have a steering liaison who can be a helpful voice with creating that report and, you know, previously in that case charter, and then turn the charter into, or, you know, a report, sorry, mixing up words now, turning the report into us on steering private, indicating that there's private tags on there, kind of like the Apache, kind of like Apache Software Foundation does it, where everything that you submit is initially private until we tell you otherwise. And then the otherwise, when we're good with it, we would say PR this into your community folder in the community repo. And then any follow-ups would be at a SIG chair and tech leads meeting with the groups that we would need to follow up with.
Okay, sounds good.
For this year, Paris, could we do this like a trial balloon thing, saying it's optional, but please, here is what you can, you know, try with us and see how that goes? at least we'll work out the kinks in the process for this year, and then we'll mandate it like beginning of next year.
Sounds good to me. What's everybody else think?
Does it mean that it will be optional, or
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Sounds
Here
like
is a
it'll be
new,
especially given
yeah,
COVID
we want to
and
trial
everything
this
too.
process. Sorry, Nikita.
No, go ahead. I was just saying that especially given COVID and everything, it probably makes sense to keep it optional this year.
To be frank, though, I have a feeling like one of the purposes of this particular process was to make sure that we have a pulse on the entire project. If we don't have a pulse on the entire project, I think a lot of the value of this goes away. In particular, if we make it optional, I have a feeling that we're going to get the same voices that we hear through the other communication channels that we already have, things like the chairs and tech lead meeting. Like the people who show up to that optional meeting are probably going to be the people who fill out the optional community health check. And the groups that we maybe hear less from are the ones that are going to say, oh, optional, okay, disregard, not do it. I definitely feel that, with our current global situation, we should be more generous with people and more generous timelines and things like that. But I guess I kind of disagree with the idea of making it optional in 2020. Like, even if we say, hey, you have 3 months to do this, like you have a quarter to do this and fill this out and return this and that kind of stuff. But please, like, humor us, go through this process so that we can make it better for we can get that pulse on our community now and not wait till 2021 and make the process better for 2021 when we enact it and have like, okay, you have a month to do this, as opposed to a longer time period.
Right. Christoph, the way I was thinking was the precedent was what we did with KEPS. KEPS we started as optional and then we made it mandatory. So I was thinking of doing the same thing here. And the other thing is, yes, we can give a 3-month deadline, but just like how PRs and KEPs get reviewed, the day before the deadline, that is what is going to end up happening. So we know how we work. We know that's what we'll end up doing. So why give a long timeline where we know that they're not going to be able to turn it around? And we don't even want to do the carrot and sticks kind of situation for this year. That was the reason behind that proposal.
Paris,
Just curious, Dims, if I'm sorry, Nikita.
Oh, Paris had her Zoom hand up.
I was fine waiting. I was just going to say for optional versus not optional, we can always start with working groups. I think that's actually how we even got here, kind of. I think like the initial 6 months ago comment was, hey, I thought that working group was temporary. And then that's how we kind of got here. So maybe we can make the working groups required and I don't know, and then go with other optional schedules. I don't know, I'm just kind of talking out loud at this point, since we, obviously do have a need, but at the same time, there is extenuating circumstances going on. So any thoughts about some kind of tiered system like that?
That's a +1 for me, Paris. I like the idea of having working groups first report their health, since they are supposed to be ephemeral and actively working. That getting a quick signal should be possible.
That works for me too.
Same.
+1.
I do plan on participating optionally as a SIG chair, though, just so I understand how this works for my SIG.
And crap. The other thing that I was going to say too is, never mind, a passing.
Right, but we have to answer Aaron, right? Can SIGs optionally send in stuff too?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think like it doesn't work. Well, maybe it doesn't work unless all of the SIG's chairs send stuff in. So
Yeah.
for me to want to do this, I'm going to have to convince my other chairs to want to do this as well. And I can't give you a quick answer off the cuff on that.
What if we roll into Christoph's idea about the SIG liaisons, and then why don't we work through the SIG liaisons for 2020 and not necessarily, like, why don't the SIG liaisons do the report on behalf of the chairs? You see what I'm saying? So meaning like we'll work in tandem. Like, so for instance, say I have 4 SIGs, right? As I'm the liaison for steering committee. I've got auth, arch, you know, name your SIGs. And then for those 4 SIGs, I go and work with the chairs and we collectively do the report together to see if this is even a thing that is possible.
I like that idea, Paris. It's really good because it'll help us set the context with them and they will understand where we are coming from. So yeah, +1.
Does that combine with the optional clause? Because the one issue that I see with going the other way and like having liaisons try and like push the reports out that direction is there's 7 of us and there's 40 of them, which is why when we were looking at this, we were designing it in the like, okay, you prep the report and bring it to us, and then we'll help review it and work through any issues with you, as opposed to a steering reach out. Because when, you know, it was a little bit different maybe in the bootstrap days when there was, you know, 12 or 13 people on steering to do things. But you know, when there's only 7 of us and 40 of them, it starts to get to a point where it doesn't necessarily scale, at least from my point of view.
All right, so we've got more work to do on this. That's what I'm hearing.
So we just go back to what we were talking before, right? We'll just do it for work groups and we'll appoint liaisons, but we might not do the reports this year.
So to recap, it's mandatory for working groups. SIGs will have steering committee liaisons. There's another issue on it, so we can talk more about it in detail later. And then SIGs can optionally submit reports. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me too. Sorry, I was writing some notes.
Okay. Paris, do you have other things you wanted to talk about in this PR or issue?
No, yeah, no. Let me make your changes, and then also put the optional language for 2020 in, and we'll continue async.
Paris member definition comes from this too, right?
Yeah, there's another...
No, that comes from the chair handbook.
There's also another specific item in the agenda about it. So before we move on to the next item, last call on community health check. I'll take that as a no. Christoph, you had created an issue about steering committee liaisons.
Yeah, this was kind of one of the items that we had talked about in the breakout meeting about community health check stuff. So when steering was handling charters and charter ratification and that kind of stuff, there was a form of liaisons where it's like, you know, a steering committee member was like the primary point person from steering to help a particular SIG work through any charter questions and that kind of stuff. And then when the charter was done, then the charter would come to the full steering committee. We discussed, and maybe it's a good idea for us to have like semi-permanent liaisons from steering to our various, community groups, SIGs, working groups, user groups, that kind of stuff. So that if a particular community group has questions that maybe come up out of band, they know, okay, this is like the steering committee person who I can reach out to, who maybe is either already attends meetings, there's already someone involved, no, but not necessarily, but they have like a point contact person that's their representative. This liaison would not be somebody who is making decisions on behalf of the steering committee, but is more kind of facilitating that initial point of contact. That it's like, hey, for example, we want to update our charter. What's the process to go around that? Or does the charter change that we make, does that actually have to come to steering, or is that charter change good enough for us to do on our own, depending on what it is that's being changed in the charter? Any kind of questions around that would kind of, they'd have a person to kind of talk to first. This would also, if we go into community health checks and that kind of stuff, the liaison will also be like the first point of contact for their community health check, any questions that would arise there, and then bring that to the full committee if needed, or if a decision is needed. So yeah, I just want to kind of bring that up as a point of discussion if we see that there's maybe value in that. Obviously these would have to change, every time we have an election or something like that. We'd kind of play musical chairs with who's the liaison for which particular SIG. But
yeah, so continuity is important, right? So we after the election we would rebalance, and then we would publish a set of people until the next election, right? And then we would basically update the website saying for each of the SIG, and then when new SIGs come in or SIGs go out, then we could think of figuring out who could take on the additional load or get freed up, right? Is that what you're thinking, Christoph?
yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
So there'd just be like an equal balance and an equal load amongst the various members and that kind of stuff. And because it's not like I when I was thinking about this, I was thinking like, should it be somebody different? Like if there's an overlap between, say, like a SIG chair or something and steering, should it be a different person? But really, I think no, because this person isn't going to be a decision maker. Like they're not necessarily making decisions on behalf of steering, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a different person. It's just like a point of contact if you have questions and that kind of stuff, or how to bring things up to steering. This person would be kind of that point of contact before something ends up coming to the full committee.
Yeah, I would say, Christoph, would it be better to have another pair of eyes? That is the way I was thinking about that part. Sometimes you get blinded because you're wearing multiple hats and you think everybody knows, but then the information doesn't really go out.
Maybe I guess I don't feel super strongly on that particular point. It was more just like not creating additional work or something, right. Like if you're already going to the meeting and that kind of stuff. But
well, I would echo what Dim said, just given that the last time that we attempted the liaison role for the steering committee was to have people go out and solicit charters from SIGs, and then also act as approvers for SIGs charters. And so even though I was on the steering committee, I needed to make sure I had other members of steering act as the liaison to be able to approve my charter. So I feel like the extra pair of eyes for a sanity check is valid. It also doesn't make sure that we're not like giving favor to those SIGs who happen to be run by steering committee members.
+1 on X-Rise, and Lucky, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just a question. Do you see this as being an active or a passive role? So active as in, you know, we talked about charters right now, Aaron did. Going and working on the health check might be another example, or is it they come to steering and steering then says, here's your liaison, work with your liaison to deal with the communication process, then bring it forth to steering? Or is it both? If it's both, then we just need to say what bits are active and what bits are passive. Because, you know, let's say you give me a SIG, do I then have to go to all of their SIG meetings and then make sure, or is it only for these pieces of work specifically?
I have at least envisioned it as a passive role as opposed to an active role. But again, you know, it is just an initial idea. We can kind of scope out, like, if there are pieces that we would see in addition to the general passive being a point of contact, that, you know, things that we want them to actively do.
Paris, you answered better on chat. I like that.
We're just going to say active, like we can call out the specific work because we know we'll need them for annual report and, you know, anything like that. And then passive would be questions, coaching, anything that's you being asked. Not necessarily us actively being a SIG member, if that makes sense. Speaking of the word member.
Yeah, that's a +1 from me.
I guess I'm overall +1 on the concept. I will register that I'm wary of dropping the ball on even more things. I don't know if this is still the case, but steering committee members tend to be pretty highly overloaded people as is. So it's probably a good idea. Hopefully we're not signing up for you know, we're not writing a check we can't cash.
I do like the idea of us, some of us, like taking some crews that we already work with, not necessarily chair, but then we'll already have, you know, kind of that relationship with some of those groups. I mean, we can maybe even put a clause in that says we can't necessarily be the liaison to something that we chair. But I mean, if we're active in the crew, that should be okay. But like key roles, not necessarily applicable or bias or something.
I won't write it in the rules saying it's prohibited, because, you know, it might just happen that it might work out better for some teams. But yeah, +1 for the overall idea. And do we need to write anything up here, Christoph, for this?
Not exactly sure where it would go off the top of my head, but yeah, I think we should have it. Definitely, step 1 would be figuring out like who's going to do what, and then documenting that somewhere. So like, you know, I can at least take the next step, which I think would be list out all of our community groups into like a spreadsheet or something like that, and figure out how many how many per steering committee member, and then we start signing them out. It'd be 5, Aaron.
If you add up SIG working groups, that's 40. So it's 5. It's like 5 or 6 for most.
Yeah. And then, you know, we can start dropping names and that kind of stuff in there on them, and make sure that we have coverage, and then document that somewhere. And then, like, last step would be communicating out to the SIGs, like, hey, here's your new liaison. If you have any questions in these kind of categories, this is at least your first point of contact. But also feel free to reach out to the full steering committee if you need like decisions on things, because that's who's going to have to make decisions anyways.
+1. Do we need to like have one little paragraph of what they can expect from us, saying we are not here to meddle with technical decisions, that kind of stuff. So, answer that upfront before they end up asking.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can draft something up ahead of the next meeting and that kind of stuff to those pieces.
I'm assigning it to you then.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay. Last call on community group liaisons. Okay, moving on. This was more of just an FYI. So we had an issue. We have an issue on the funding repo about setting up a DigitalOcean account for E2E testing. DIMS has created a service test ticket, and CNCF said that they'll talk to DigitalOcean and come back with a response by end of week. Igor said that we've started discussion with DigitalOcean. Any other updates or anything you want to mention, DIMS or Igor, about this?
Just in terms of numbers, it would be between $600 and $1,000 per month, and according to the calculations that we ended up making on that PR. So and CNCF actually, Chris actually said that no problem, we'll be able to do it even if we don't get credits, but let's try the credits first. So that's where we are.
Yep. No other updates from me. So we're starting discussing that with DigitalOcean, and we'll circle back on this later once we'll have any details. But as Dims and Chris mentioned, so we're happy to cover that if we won't have any credits. Details later.
Perfect. Paris, you have descoping and scoping the term member.
Yes. So I have discovered in multiple journeys here over the last 6 months that the term member, we've actually had conversations about this on steering, is a little convoluted, and it's kind of like the term service. So anyway, and I just wanted to see if we could get a more clear-cut definition so that folks will understand when we start requesting things, like for instance in an annual report, when we start talking about SIG membership and how they measure their SIG membership. And then really where this stemmed from was actually the chair rulebook in sig-governance.md that talks about the members of that document in particular being chairs, tech leads, and sub-project owners. So obviously for that doc, it had a very specific purpose, but when you mix that type of doc in with 3 other docs that say the same thing about the purpose of that doc being the word, the member equals this term, it gets a little crazy. So I wanted to get some discussion around this from steering. I did not include too many next steps because I wanted to talk about this before we kind of dove head first, because we do have the contributor ladder at community-membership.md, and then we also have, like I said, the SIG governance and other governance docs that are floating around that talk about member in other ways. Questions, concerns, comments?
I have an opinion, but I would like to hear from election committee members on how they do this right now. George, Bob?
For defining members?
How do you collect a list of people to send out election?
So in the previous elections, we got a dump from DevStats of any email that was, or I'm sorry, any GitHub account that was associated with 50 or more contributions in the past year. And we then essentially take that map, get like the dump of email addresses from DevStats and try and line it up and make that association.
And then we generate a form for people who, an exception form. But the 50 number we get from steering. I think it's been 50 twice in a row now, right?
Yeah, the definition of member comes from us. And again, that's where it's been like not in alignment.
Do we call them members, this list of people, or do we call them people who are eligible to vote in this election?
We call them members of standing, actually.
Okay.
So members plus standing.
Members plus standing. Okay.
I thought it was member of standing. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah, regardless, we're saying that they're a member and they have standing to vote. So like an extra cream, an extra cherry on the top of the election froyo. So there's so as you can see, there's a lot of things that are intertwined here. And it would be cool if we could at least try to say, okay, if you're a member here in the upstream Kubernetes project, that means you belong to the GitHub organization. And then whenever we define member of standing, that means, hey, you're in the GitHub organization plus 50 dev stats plus whatever else, whatever arbitrary thing we decide at that time.
Okay. One more question related to the same thing. How many of these people actually vote, George and Bob?
So
let me get the stats.
I have the stats handy. Out of our last election, we had 879 voters. Of those, 602 were Kubernetes org members. That's across any of the Kubernetes orgs. 277 were not. Let's see. And I believe out of that, we had 300 and... So I have this in a different tab. 377 of the pool actually voted. One other little thing of note, 211 of the people were not subscribed to the KDev mailing list at all. So out of the people that are not org members, the majority of them don't follow any of our upstream sort of communication channels.
The number of people who aren't org members jumps out at me as unusually high compared to the previous 2 years of elections, just for what it's worth. Felt like the number of people who came in through a form instead of through DevStats was in the low double digits the past 2 years. I'm curious what was different this year.
That was still low double digits, but I'm talking on behalf of Bob. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, it's okay. You were, low double digits.
So right now, we have over 1,200 people in our GitHub org. Right now, the GitHub org is treated as a permission set. So it's a technical permission set. You get, if you need access to the GitHub org, basically it lets you LGTM things. Previously you needed to be in the org to be assigned things. That's no longer the case anymore, but it lets you LGTM things. The bot trusts you to run tests on PRs. So it's kind of defined as like that. And if you need to be a member of any teams or any notification teams and that kind of stuff, you need to be in the org to be able to be a member of a team. I know if we think you needed 50 contributions to be a member of the GitHub org, so we think like what the voting threshold is with who gets into the GitHub org, we'd be kicking a lot of people out of the GitHub org. And right now we don't have an active set way to get people out of the org. I know with my org owner hat, the GitHub administration team hat on, I know that we're working on that. And we're going to try and start telling people who have not been active in like some number of years from the org. So we could do this, like doing this, like syncing what a community member is with being active in the GitHub org. If we synced those two up, that's very possible to do, but there would be implications for that.
Okay. So my opinion, is basically what Paris started saying, which is we have lists. We have either people who are members of our GitHub org, or they are in our owners files for specific groups, right? So it's basically not somebody who opted into something like joining a mailing list. It's more like somebody in our group noticed and added somebody to something, right? That is who I would consider a member, loosely. So if we actively added somebody to an owner's file, or we added somebody to the GitHub org, then they are a member. Which means we have three kinds of members. One is org member, SIG member, and working group member, right? So those would be like the three different varieties of members, if you use that yardstick. And the places we would go to look at who's on record is the owners files and the GitHub org and GitHub groups, I guess. Those are the places that we go look for, where the SIGs can maintain lists of people, right? So in the root owners file of KK, we have groups of approvers and reviewers, and each SIG maintains a list of people there. So this means that if somebody joined a mailing list by themselves, they are not necessarily member of that SIG per se until they get elevated. They are a contributor, but not a member. So essentially, we have them on record for something. That would be the yardstick there.
I added some thoughts around this in the issue as well. I kind of agree with that. So I feel like we could rename, we have a community membership.md doc. If we could rename it explicitly as something like GitHub membership.md, and which says that you don't really need to be part of the GitHub org to be a community member. That's point number one. Point number two would be, like Dim said, SIG member would be someone who has contributed to a SIG, is added an owner's file or a GitHub group for that SIG. I would also like extend that to any non-code contributions or any other contributions to a repo owned by the SIG. And yeah, and then we also have something called as a working group member. I had another question around the fact that the previous steering committee had mentioned that they don't want to use the term lead for chairs, TLs, and sub-project owners. Does anyone have context around that?
It was probably very amorphous, I think. We haven't defined that term anywhere, if I remember right. Aaron?
The term lead itself?
Yeah.
I'd have to think. I mean, we have it's probably a subtle language thing on just wanting to show service versus like prominence, but I honestly can't recall. I'd have to go and look in maybe old mail history.
Yeah, I think it was something like that, possibly to underscore that we would prefer that tech leads make technical decisions as opposed to people seeking a technical decision from somebody who's more about keeping everything organized and in line and so on and so forth. But I personally have kind of used the term lead to describe the union of people who are either a chair, a tech lead, or a sub-project owner when it comes to talking about somebody who is like the single point of contact for a group of other people. And I don't, I can't, I'm not entirely sure what's wrong with that, but I'm very open to suggestion there. Yeah, on the concept of SIG member, I don't know. The concept of SIG member, all of this discussion about very technical semantics makes me want to ask what problem we're trying to solve here.
Yeah.
But,
so the problem, I think I've talked about this before. As a SIG lead, you don't know who you can rely on, who you can delegate to, who you can count on. And if somebody becomes a member, then they automatically get drafted into, okay, you have some roles and responsibilities, and this is some of the things that you need to do. You need to help with things happening in the SIG, right? And we don't have that concept right now. And that's what I'm trying to get help to SIG leads, saying, okay, this is the set of people that you can rely on from now on to choose as people you can delegate stuff to. SIGs are overloaded, and I'm trying to get them help from within the set of people that they work with.
okay.
The other thing is when contributors say, how do I join a SIG? The antidote is always join the mailing list. The antidote is not written down anywhere.
Right. And you know, some of the SIGs have started keeping lists of people who they would like to you know, give additional roles, or even shadow becoming a chair, or becoming a technical lead. Those kinds of things can happen as well. So this goes into your ladder as well, Paris.
What's the quick pulse check on changing the SIG-governance doc to lead to describe chair, tech lead, and sub-project owner for the purpose of that document? Do we have any concerns or people in the middle of the road, or plus ones, or no decision?
I'm okay with going with how Aaron explained it as the language there.
The way Aaron explained it is my understanding too, and how I would use that. Although, like, I think we definitely need to make sure that if we just see if there would be any unintended consequences of the language if we were to change that in the governance doc.
And I think previous steering committee also changed the term for the purpose of splitting the roles as well, because the term lead was, folks were taking both roles, and then come to find out it is very beneficial, everyone, to have multiple roles. And I think that's also where some of the lead terminology stemmed from that context. All right, for the sake of keeping it going, I will PR in the lead change, or the lead verbiage change, to the chair handbook, and then we can at least check that out to see what it looks like in print, and then we can go from there. Cool. All right, and we'll at least start there.
Can I assign this to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Getting lots of things done today. Next one, this was the thing that we've been talking about for the past few minutes. There's a chair role handbook pull request open. Please review it. And yeah, that's kind of all I had. Paris, do you have anything more? We have like 8 minutes left, by the way.
Let's make sure we get to Igor, please.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I had just an FYI that there's a SIG cluster lifecycle charter changes PR. It's a very minor PR, so please take a look at it. And next up, DIMS, the travel, DIMS anyhow.
Yeah. So I just wanted to wrap up the discussion on this topic. We had requested, we had talked about how we could give people who are not necessarily diversity candidates a way for us to say that we would like them to come to some of our events and stuff like that. So Igor, work with the rest of the people there. Igor, do you want to comment on the scholarship program changes and how they affect us?
So which changes are you speaking about?
So in addition to diversity scholarship,
Yep.
we can nominate some people so that they can be funded through CNCF for travel to events.
Right. Yeah. So this selection is basically made by people who form the program committee of the event and other folks who are selected. So I don't have enough context on that. I'm happy to connect you, Deems, and other folks from steering, whoever is necessary, with folks within CNCF to continue this discussion. So just to avoid me being a proxy here, I can connect you and you'll follow up, and happy to update this PR later.
Right. So let me be very clear, Igor. I'm looking for, here is the set of steps that either steering committee members or Contribex members need to do. Here is fill up this Google form, send an email to this mailing list, anything. I just need like a small write-up that we can publicize so we can get this ready for Boston.
Yep, sure. Happy to help with this.
Okay, so we can close this issue and just do this offline then.
Yeah, I'll connect with all you offline, and you'll decide if you'll need to close this now or later when the final decision will be made. But I'm happy to assist you with this.
Okay, thanks, Igor.
It was not clear for me that this question was not solved, so apologies for keeping this in an open state for such a long time. But
no worries. Yeah.
To fix this.
The reason for escalating this right now is, I wanted to be sure that we don't miss the boat for Boston.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. We have 5 more minutes left. So I had this super tiny thing I wanted to talk about. We have an issue which says discussions topics meta issue with questions like, do we need user groups? Do we need an insurance to be policy similar to this? I don't think this is particularly actionable, and that we could probably close this and reopen new issues if we need something. Lost file. Okay.
Is that a no to these questions or a yes, but not right now?
It's more like if you need to talk more about this, create a specific issue with more details.
So, yeah, I mean, if we say user group right now, what we are telling people is, okay, go form user groups at the CNCF level, right? For insurance, we are talking, the foundation is covering us. The release policy we have delegated. Conflict of interest policy. I don't know. We haven't poked at it yet. So that's the only one that if we need to poke at it.
Okay, that's fine.
Does anybody feel strongly over opening a separate issue for the conflict of interest?
I don't feel strongly. I'm okay with just closing this. And if any of these particular issues come up and we need to address them, then we can at that time.
Okay.
The only one here that like concerns me from a proactive standpoint is insurance, but I'm going to trust that the CNCF has it covered.
Okay. Technically, we do already have user groups in case. All right, so I guess our answer is, we'll get there when we get there, as needed. These may be important or not, we don't know, but they're not urgent, so we're not going to deal with them.
Okay, I will write whatever we discussed and then close the issue next. We're now going to go to the project board. Who wants to be the next person? I mean, we did this last time. I'm happy to person in the next private meeting. We just have to choose the person for the next private public meeting.
I'm +1 to you bosoning the next private meeting, if you're good with that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
like the
We
idea of
could
somebody.
choose the next public boson there.
I like the idea of somebody doing 2 of these in a row, so there's some continuity and momentum.
Sure, no worries.
And you're doing great, Nikita. You actually mailed out an agenda, unlike me, so thank you.
Yeah, I loved it.
On Friday evening.
At this point, I feel that Paris is overburdened. She has too many things on her plate,
Yeah.
Paris. So I don't know.
Paris, do you need something
Off your plate?
Yeah.
Whatever y'all want to help with, do it. That's how I roll. Whoever wants to collaborate with me on any of these things, I would love to have you. I'm about to set another issue too, so. Yeah, no, I mean, open-ended offer for anybody that wants to help on any of the things that I'm working on.
Are you planning to do the member lead thing in a separate PR or in the same PR that you have open? Like if it's separate, I can. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to do it in the same PR.
No worries.
Cool. I mean, I think I'm rounding the corner on most of my things too, now that we've had discussions about a lot of it. I think that's where the hardest part is getting everybody's consensus and things. So
the other one, Paris, is can we do the resolve conversation stuff so it's so we don't have to, it gets in the way of the review.
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time.
So in the PRs, if there's a comment from somebody and there is nothing else we're going to do with that comment, we can just do the resolve.
Yeah.
Click on the resolve button there. So
yeah,
we know that it's not like an open question that we still have to work on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what
I was trying to do this the Friday and I was like intimidated. Okay, do we actually still have to? I wasn't sure whether that has been addressed or not, or addressed elsewhere or not. Okay.
Yeah, everything that's been resolved has a resolved comment, and everything that's opened is open for a legit discussion reason. And on the chair handbook in particular, everything that's opened, it has to do with lead, the term lead, and things like that. So that's why there's like 8 people commenting that they think it's confused, that they're confused. Okay. So that's why there's a ton of comments that are still open.
On that note, we are over time. So thank you everyone for joining and have a happy Monday.
Thanks, Nikita.
Bye.
Bye.
Nikita.
Bye everyone.
Bye.